I knew something was wrong the moment I saw Patricia Henderson standing on my front porch at 7 in the morning, clutching her ridiculous clipboard like it was the Holy Grail. The snow had been falling for 3 days straight in Boulder, Colorado, and the entire neighborhood was buried under 2 feet of the white stuff. Most normal people would be inside with coffee, maybe shoveling their own driveways. But Patricia wasn't normal people. She was the HOA president, and she had that look in her eyes that told me my peaceful Saturday morning was about to go straight to hell. I'm Tyler Kensington, and I've lived in the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision for exactly 4 years. I'm a structural engineer by trade, which is important to remember because what happened next wouldn't have been nearly as satisfying if I didn't know exactly what I was looking at when things went sideways. I work from home most days, designing commercial buildings and occasionally consulting on residential projects. Life was pretty good until Patricia and her band of busybodies decided that their authority extended beyond common areas and into dictating what homeowners did with their own property. "Mr. Kensington," Patricia said the moment I opened the door, not bothering with pleasantries. She was maybe 55, with that severe haircut that seemed mandatory for women who enjoyed making other people's lives difficult. "I'm here on official HOA business." "Patricia, it's 7 in the morning on a Saturday. The HOA bylaws don't recognize weekends when there's a safety concern." She thrust a paper at me. "You need to clear the snow off the community center roof immediately." I stared at her, then at the paper, then back at her. "I'm sorry, what?" "The community center roof. It's a shared responsibility property, and as the homeowner nearest to it, you're responsible for maintenance during winter weather events." "That's not my property. That's HOA property." Section 14. Paragraph 8 of the bylaws clearly states that adjacent homeowners share responsibility for emergency maintenance of common structures. She pointed down the street where the community center sat, a squat building that hosted the occasional potluck dinner and served as Patricia's personal kingdom. "The snow load is excessive. It needs to be cleared today." I took the paper and read it. Sure enough, buried in the legal nonsense was a clause about adjacent property owners and shared emergency maintenance obligations. It was the kind of thing that sounds official, but falls apart under any real scrutiny. I'd read the bylaws when I bought the house, but like most people, I'd skimmed the dense sections full of legalese. Big mistake. "Patricia, I'm not climbing on that roof. It's dangerous and frankly, it's not my job." "Then you'll be fined $500 per day until compliance is achieved." She smiled, and it wasn't friendly. "The snow has been accumulating for 3 days. That's already $1,500. I suggest you get started before it becomes more expensive." She turned and walked away, her boots crunching in the snow, leaving me standing there with my coffee getting cold and my blood pressure rising. I went back inside and called my lawyer, Marcus Chen, who I'd used when buying the house. He didn't answer because, again, it was 7 in the morning on a Saturday. I left a message explaining the situation and asking him to review the bylaws. Then I did what any structural engineer would do. I grabbed my gear and went to look at the roof. The community center was a basic rectangular building with a standard gable roof, maybe 1,500 square feet total. From the street, I could see the snow piled high, probably close to 3 feet in some areas where it had drifted. I walked around the building, examining the structure. The walls were concrete block, typical for this kind of construction, built maybe 20 years ago. The roof was a simple truss system, nothing fancy. And that's when I saw the problem. The building had been constructed on the cheap. I could see it in the way the roof sagged slightly in the middle, the way some of the fascia boards had separated from the structure. This wasn't a well-built building maintained properly. This was a budget job that had been neglected for years. The snow load on that roof was probably approaching the design limit, maybe even exceeding it. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Lots of pictures. The sagging roofline, the separated fascia, the cracks in the concrete block walls that suggested foundation settlement, the missing shingles and deteriorated flashing. This building had problems long before the snow showed up. Then I did some quick calculations. Snow weighs about 20 pounds per cubic foot when it's fresh and powdery, more when it's wet and compacted. With 3 feet of accumulation and the drifting patterns I was seeing, that roof was supporting somewhere between 50 and 75 pounds per square foot. Most residential roofs in Colorado are designed for about 30 to 40 pounds per square foot snow load. Commercial buildings have higher requirements, but this community center had been built to residential standards. I called Marcus again. This time he picked up. "Tyler, it's Saturday morning. I know, and I'm sorry, but I need legal advice right now. The HOA is trying to make me climb on their roof to clear snow, and that roof is about to collapse." That woke him up. I explained the situation while I walked back to my house, sending him photos as I talked. He was quiet for a moment after I finished. "Okay, here's what you need to know. That bylaw clause is questionable at best. It's probably unenforceable because it assigns maintenance responsibility for property you don't own and haven't agreed to maintain. But fighting it will take time." "How much time?" "Weeks, maybe months if they push back hard. In the meantime, they can keep fining you." "And the roof? That's the interesting part. If you, as a structural engineer, have assessed that the roof is unsafe and you've documented it, you have a professional obligation not to go up there. In fact, doing so could expose you to liability if something goes wrong. You need to send the HOA a formal notification that the structure is unsafe and recommend they hire a professional. They're going to lose their minds. Probably. But it's better than you losing your life. Send that notice today in writing with your photos and calculations. Email and certified mail. Cover yourself completely." I thanked him and got to work. I spent the next 2 hours writing a detailed structural assessment of the community center, complete with photos, calculations, and a professional recommendation that no one access the roof until a qualified contractor could properly assess and address the snow load. I noted the pre-existing structural deficiencies and stated clearly that attempting to clear the snow manually could actually trigger a collapse by adding dynamic loads to an already overstressed structure. I sent it to Patricia via email at 9:30. By 10:15, my phone was ringing. "This is ridiculous." Patricia's voice was shrill enough to hurt my ears. "You're making excuses to avoid your responsibilities. I'm giving you professional advice that could save someone's life. That roof needs to be cleared by a professional using proper equipment, not by a homeowner with a shovel. The HOA doesn't have the budget for that. We have $8,000 in our reserve fund, and we're not spending it because you're too lazy to do your duty." "Then file an insurance claim. That's what insurance is for. Our deductible is $10,000. We'd have to pay the whole thing ourselves." And there it was. The HOA had cheaped out on insurance, and now they wanted me to risk my neck to save them money. "That's not my problem, Patricia. I'm not going on that roof." Then I'm authorizing the fines. $500 per day starting 3 days ago. You now owe the HOA $1,500, and it's going up every single day. She hung up. I sat there for a minute, then called Marcus back. "She's proceeding with the fines." "Let her. Document everything. If this goes to court, you'll win. The question is whether the HOA has the money to pay you back after you sue them for wrongful fines and harassment. There's another option, I said, looking out my window at the community center. I could just wait. Wait for what? For physics to do its job. That roof is going to come down. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And when it does, I have documentation that I warned them, that I offered professional advice, and that they ignored it in favor of shaking me down for money. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You're sure it's going to collapse? I'd bet my professional license on it. The question is timing. Could be hours, could be days. But with more snow in the forecast and temperatures staying below freezing, it's going to happen. Then document everything. Every communication, every fine they levy, every interaction. When this goes bad, you want to be bulletproof. Over the next 2 days, Patricia sent me 4 more notices. The fines continued to accumulate, $500 per day, now totaling $2,500. Other members of the HOA board started calling. There was Dennis Hoffman, the treasurer, who tried the reasonable approach. There was Margaret Schultz, the secretary, who tried sympathy. There was Robert Young, the at-large member, who just seemed confused about why this was happening at all. I gave them all the same answer. The roof was unsafe. I wasn't going up there. They needed to hire a professional or file an insurance claim. Every conversation was documented and recorded with my phone set to speaker mode and a recording app running. Colorado is a one-party consent state, which meant I could legally record any conversation I was part of. The weather forecast was calling for another major storm. 6 to 8 inches starting Tuesday night, with heavy wet snow. I watched the forecast obsessively, checking multiple weather services and looking at the models. This next storm was going to be the straw that broke the camel's back, or in this case, broke the community center's roof. Tuesday morning, Patricia showed up again. This time she had Dennis with her. Mr. Kensington, you now owe the HOA $3,000 in fines, Dennis said. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. We need to resolve this. I've told you how to resolve it. Hire a professional. We can't afford it, Patricia snapped. And you're being deliberately obstinate. We have 3 other homeowners who have offered to help clear the roof if you'll just go up there and supervise. Absolutely not. I'm not supervising an unsafe operation, and I'm certainly not participating in one. Then we're filing a lien against your property, Patricia said. The fines will continue to accumulate, and when they reach $5,000, we're legally entitled to place a lien on your home. You do what you need to do. I've given you professional advice. What you do with it is your business. They left, and I went back to watching the weather. The storm rolled in Tuesday evening right on schedule. Heavy, wet snow that came down in sheets. By Wednesday morning, there was another 8 inches on top of everything else, and the weight was visible even from my house. The roofline of the community center sagged dramatically in the middle, bowing down like a hammock. I took more photos. Lots of photos. Then I sent another email to the HOA board. The structural situation has deteriorated significantly. The roof is now visibly sagging. I strongly recommend evacuating any adjacent properties and calling in a professional structural engineer immediately. This building is in danger of imminent collapse. Patricia's response came back in less than 5 minutes. Stop trying to scare people. The building has been here for 20 years and it's fine. Your fines now total $4,000. I forwarded the entire email chain to Marcus. She's digging her own grave, he replied. Keep documenting. Wednesday afternoon, I heard it. A sound like a giant groaning followed by a sharp crack that echoed across the neighborhood. I grabbed my phone and ran outside. Other neighbors were coming out too, looking around in confusion. The community center roof was sagging even more now, the center beam visibly bowed. As I watched, there was another crack and the snow shifted slightly. The building was in its death throes. I called 911. I need to report a structural collapse in progress. Community Center at 1247 Meadowbrook Heights Drive, Boulder. The roof is failing under snow load. No one is inside, but adjacent properties may be at risk. The dispatcher took my information and said they'd send someone out. Within 15 minutes, a fire truck and a police car arrived. I met them on the street and explained the situation, showing them my earlier reports and photos. "You're a structural engineer?" the fire captain asked. His name tag read Morrison. "Yes, sir. I warned the HOA about this 3 days ago. They refused to take action." He looked at the building, then at his crew. "We need to establish a perimeter. If that roof goes, debris could spread 50 feet or more." They started setting up barriers and evacuating the 2 houses closest to the community center. Patricia showed up, of course, driving her silver Lexus like she was responding to a national emergency. "What is going on here?" she demanded. "Who authorized this?" "Madam, I'm Captain Morrison with Boulder Fire Rescue. This building is in danger of imminent structural collapse. We're evacuating the area." "This is ridiculous. Tyler Kensington put you up to this, didn't he? He's been trying to scare everyone because he doesn't want to do his job." "Madam, I don't know anything about that. What I know is that building is about to come down, and I'm responsible for public safety. I demand to see proof. I demand to speak to your supervisor. I demand—" She was interrupted by another loud crack. We all turned to look at the community center. The roof sagged another 6 inches, and now I could see daylight through gaps in the structure. "Everyone back," Morrison shouted. Now, we retreated to the street. More neighbors had gathered, watching the drama unfold. I spotted Robert Young in the crowd, looking pale. "Is it really going to collapse?" he asked me quietly. "Yes, probably in the next few hours." "Oh my God, Patricia said you were exaggerating." "I gave you my professional assessment. What Patricia chose to do with that information was her decision." The fire department kept everyone back behind the barriers. Morrison called in a city building inspector, who arrived about 30 minutes later. I watched him walk around the building, taking photos and making notes. He conferred with Morrison for a few minutes, then came over to me. "You're the engineer who filed the warnings?" "Yes, Tyler Kensington." I shook his hand. "Jim Rodriguez, City Building Department. Can you send me your reports?" I pulled them up on my phone and emailed them to him on the spot. He read through them, nodding slowly. "Your assessment is accurate. This building should have been maintained better. The HOA is going to have some explaining to do. The HOA president is right over there if you want to talk to her." I pointed at Patricia, who was standing by her car talking rapidly on her phone. Rodriguez walked over to her. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see Patricia's face getting redder and redder. She gestured wildly, pointed at me several times, and at one point actually stamped her foot like a child throwing a tantrum. The afternoon wore on. The fire department maintained the perimeter. The snow kept falling lightly, adding more weight to an already doomed structure. News trucks showed up, because of course they did. A building collapse in a nice Boulder suburb was exactly the kind of story that played well on the evening news. A reporter spotted me and came over. "Sir, do you live here? Can you tell us what's happening?" I considered my options carefully. On one hand, I could tell my side of the story. On the other hand, anything I said would be on camera and could potentially be used in court later. I decided to go with a carefully edited version. "I'm a structural engineer who lives in the neighborhood. I assessed the building 3 days ago and warned the HOA that the snow load was dangerous. They declined to take action. Now we're waiting to see if the fire department can somehow prevent the collapse. Why didn't the HOA take action? You'd have to ask them that. The reporter's eyes lit up, and she went to find Patricia. I watched from a distance as Patricia launched into what I was sure was a completely one-sided account of events. The reporter nodded, took notes, and then came back toward me. I shook my head and walked away. I'd said my piece. By 6 that evening, the sun was setting and the temperature was dropping. The fire department brought in portable lights. Captain Morrison made an announcement through a bullhorn. The building is continuing to deteriorate. We're going to maintain the perimeter overnight. Residents of 1245 and 1249 Meadowbrook Heights Drive will need to stay with friends or family tonight. We'll reassess in the morning. As if on cue, there was another sharp crack. This one was louder, more violent. The center of the roof dropped suddenly, maybe a foot all at once. Someone in the crowd screamed. The firefighters backed up even further. "That's it," Morrison said. "Everybody back to the next street. This thing is coming down now." We all retreated. I stood with my neighbors on the corner, watching the community center's death rattle. The snow had stopped falling and the sky was clear and cold. The portable lights cast stark shadows across the damaged building. At 7:42 p.m., the roof finally let go. It wasn't dramatic like in the movies. There was no explosion, no huge crash. Just a long, drawn-out groan of tortured wood and metal. And then the center of the roof folded inward like a house of cards. The trusses snapped, the decking collapsed, and 20 tons of snow and building material crashed down into the interior of the community center. The walls bowed outward from the impact, and for a moment I thought they might go too, but they held. Dust and snow billowed out from the broken structure. The crowd was silent, shocked. Then everyone started talking at once. I pulled out my phone and took more photos. The community center was now effectively a one-story building with partial walls and no roof. Everything inside would be destroyed. All the furniture, the kitchen equipment, the storage areas where the HOA kept their records. Gone. Patricia stood next to her Lexus, staring at the wreckage. Her face was pale, her mouth hanging open. For once in her life, she appeared to be speechless. Captain Morrison was on his radio, coordinating with someone. After a few minutes, he came over to where the crowd had gathered. "The immediate danger has passed. The walls appear stable for now, but we're going to keep the perimeter in place until a structural engineer can do a full assessment tomorrow. Residents of the evacuated homes can return for tonight, but if we hear any more concerning sounds, we may need to evacuate again." People started drifting away, heading back to their homes. The news crews got their footage and left. The fire truck stayed, along with one police car, to maintain the scene overnight. I went home and poured myself a bourbon. Then I sat down and started compiling my documentation. Every email, every photo, every calculation. I put together a timeline showing exactly when I'd warned the HOA, what I'd said, and how they'd responded. I documented the fines they'd levied against me, now totaling $4,000. Then I started drafting a letter to the HOA board. Not a nice letter. A letter that made it very clear that they had ignored professional advice, attempted to coerce me into dangerous behavior, and levied fines based on a questionable interpretation of bylaws that almost certainly wouldn't hold up in court. A letter that informed them I would be seeking reimbursement for all fines, plus compensation for my time spent dealing with their harassment, plus my legal fees. Marcus called it 9. I saw the news. The roof actually came down. Like clockwork, physics doesn't care about HOA bylaws. "You need to send that demand letter tomorrow. Strike while the iron is hot and everyone remembers that you were right." Already drafting it. Question though, How much should I ask for? All your fines back, obviously. Your legal fees, which will bill at my standard rate. Your time, which as a structural engineer consulting on this matter should be billed at your professional rate. Let's call it $200 an hour. How much time have you spent on this? I did the math. Easily 20 hours of my time, probably more. So 4,000 in fines, plus 4,000 for my time, plus your fees. I'll keep my fees reasonable. Call it 3,000. So you're looking at $11,000, plus you might want to add something for emotional distress and harassment. Make it 15,000 even. Nice round number. I'll draft it up and send it over for your review tomorrow morning. Thursday morning, the city building inspector was back at the collapsed community center with a crew. I watched from my window as they surveyed the damage. Around 10, Rodriguez came to my door. Mr. Kensington, I wanted to thank you for your reports. They're going to be very helpful in our investigation. The city is opening an inquiry into the HOA's maintenance of this structure and their decision-making process. Investigation. When there's a structural collapse, even one with no injuries, we have to investigate whether there was negligence involved. Your reports clearly show that the HOA was warned about the danger and chose not to act. That could have legal consequences for them. What kind of consequences? That depends on what we find. Could be fines from the city. Could be civil liability. Could be criminal charges if we determine their actions were reckless enough. After Rodriguez left, I received an email from Patricia. It was short and furious. The community center has been destroyed because you refused to help. The HOA will be billing you for the full cost of reconstruction. Your fines continue to accumulate. I forwarded it to Marcus with a note. Evidence of continued harassment and delusional thinking. His response: perfect. This helps our case. I'm sending over the demand letter now. The demand letter was a thing of beauty. 3 pages of legal language that boiled down to, you screwed up, you ignored professional advice, you harassed me with illegal fines, and now you're going to pay for it. $15,000, payable within 30 days or we'd file suit in district court. Marcus sent it via email and certified mail to the entire HOA board. We got responses within hours. Robert Young's response was apologetic. I should have listened to you. I'm sorry this happened. I'll support paying your demand. Margaret Schultz was similar. This got out of hand. Patricia was so sure she was right, I don't know what to say. Dennis Hoffman was worried about money. The HOA doesn't have $15,000. Our reserve fund is only $8,000, and we're going to need that for the community center. Patricia's response was predictable. This demand is outrageous and we will not pay a single penny. You are responsible for this disaster and we will see you in court. At least she's consistent, Marcus said when I called him. Consistently wrong, but consistent. Over the next week, things got complicated. The city's investigation proceeded, with Rodriguez and his team examining the HOA's maintenance records for the community center. Or rather, the lack of maintenance records. Turned out the HOA had been deferring maintenance on the building for years to keep dues low. The roof should have been replaced 5 years ago. The foundation issues should have been addressed even earlier. The HOA's insurance company sent an investigator. He spent a day at the site, then requested all the documentation about the collapse. I provided my reports and my communications with the HOA. A week later, the insurance company sent a letter to the HOA denying the claim. The reason: the HOA had been notified of the structural deficiency by a licensed professional and had failed to take action. That constituted negligence, and their policy didn't cover losses resulting from negligence. The community center would not be rebuilt on the insurance company's dime. Patricia called an emergency HOA meeting. I attended because I wanted to watch this train wreck in person. The meeting was held in Margaret Schultz's living room since the community center was, well, not available. There were maybe 30 people crammed into the space. Patricia stood at the front, her face set in angry lines. "We're here to discuss the community center situation and the outrageous demands made by Tyler Kensington." "You mean the demands you caused by harassing him?" someone called out. I looked over and saw it was Janet Moore, who lived 2 streets over. "I saw the news. He warned you the building was going to collapse, and you fined him instead of listening. He had a responsibility to help maintain common property. He's not a roofer. He's an engineer, and he told you it wasn't safe." The meeting dissolved into chaos. People were shouting over each other. Some were angry at Patricia, some were angry at me, some were just angry at the whole situation. Dennis tried to restore order but failed. Finally, Robert Young stood up. "I move that we pay Tyler Kensington's demand. He was right, we were wrong, and we need to settle this before it gets even more expensive." "Second," Margaret said immediately. "We don't have the money," Dennis protested. "We'd have to levy a special assessment on all homeowners." "How much?" Janet asked. "About $250 per household." The room erupted again. Nobody wanted to pay extra because the HOA board had screwed up. Patricia tried to argue that they should fight it, that my demands were unreasonable, that I was the one who should be paying. "Patricia, shut up," Janet said loudly. The room went quiet. "You created this mess. You ignored professional advice. You harassed a homeowner and fined him illegally. You got the community center destroyed, and now our insurance won't pay. Every single part of this disaster is your fault. We're paying Tyler, and then we're voting you off the board." There was a murmur of agreement. Patricia looked around the room, her face red, and saw that she'd lost. Her reign as HOA president was over. The vote was 31 in favor of paying my demand, 4 against. The 4 were Patricia's friends, the other busybodies who'd supported her tyrannical approach to HOA management. Then someone moved to remove Patricia from the board and hold new elections. That vote was even more lopsided. 36 in favor, only Patricia herself against. Dennis abstained. Patricia stood up, grabbed her purse, and stormed out. "You're all going to regret this. This HOA is falling apart without proper leadership." "Good riddance," someone muttered. After she left, the mood lightened considerably. Dennis, as treasurer, explained the financial situation. The HOA had $8,000 in reserves, which would cover about half my demand. They'd need a special assessment of $125 per household to cover the rest. Plus, they'd need another assessment to deal with the community center, which was going to cost at least $50,000 to demolish and rebuild. "Can we just not rebuild it?" someone asked. "I mean, we barely use the thing anyway." That sparked a long discussion about whether they really needed a community center at all. Some people wanted it rebuilt. Others thought it was a waste of money. Eventually, they tabled the discussion for a future meeting and focused on settling my claim. I received a check for $8,000 the following week, with a promise that the remaining $7,000 would come within 60 days, once they collected the special assessment. Marcus and I agreed to accept the payment plan, and I signed a settlement agreement releasing the HOA from further liability. But the story wasn't over. 2 weeks after the meeting, Rodriguez from the city building department called me. "Mr. Kensington, I wanted to give you a heads up. We're referring the HOA matter to the district attorney's office. For criminal charges, possibly. We found evidence that Patricia Henderson knowingly ignored multiple warnings about structural deficiencies, not just from you, but from a city inspector who had flagged the building for maintenance issues 2 years ago. She never brought that inspection report to the HOA board's attention. She just filed it away and ignored it. That seems more like incompetence than criminal behavior. Normally, I'd agree, but there's more. We also found that she'd been paying herself from HOA funds for administrative work without board approval. About $15,000 over the past 3 years. Now that was interesting. Embezzlement, that's what it looks like. The DA is reviewing everything now. I can't say more than that, but I thought you'd want to know. A month later, Patricia Henderson was arrested. The charges were embezzlement and reckless endangerment. The embezzlement was for the unauthorized payments to herself. The reckless endangerment was for her knowing failure to address the structural deficiencies in the community center, which could have resulted in serious injury or death if anyone had been inside when it collapsed. The local news covered it extensively. The story of an HOA president gone rogue played well on television. I declined interview requests. I'd gotten my money and my vindication. I didn't need to pile on. Patricia pleaded not guilty and hired a lawyer. Her trial was set for 6 months out. In the meantime, the HOA moved forward with new elections. Robert Young became the new president. Margaret Schultz stayed on as secretary. They brought in 2 new board members, including Janet Moore. One of their first acts was to hire a property management company to handle the day-to-day operations. No more volunteers with too much time and too much authority. Professional management meant proper maintenance schedules, proper record keeping, and someone who actually understood what they were doing. The community center remained a pile of rubble for months. The new board got quotes for demolition and removal, which came to about $12,000. Then they had to deal with the question of whether to rebuild. The debate raged on for weeks. Eventually, they put it to a vote of all homeowners. Rebuild the community center for $50,000 split among all households, or just remove the debris and turn the lot into a park. The park won by a significant margin. Turned out most people didn't really want a community center badly enough to pay for it. They hired a landscaping company to clean up the lot and plant grass and trees. It actually looked nice. Meanwhile, Patricia's legal situation deteriorated. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA wasn't interested in being generous. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showed the unauthorized payments. City records showed the ignored inspection reports. My documentation showed her response to warnings about the structural danger. In the end, Patricia accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of embezzlement and 1 count of criminal negligence. She was sentenced to 90 days in jail, 3 years probation, and ordered to make restitution to the HOA for the money she'd taken. The judge had some choice words for her at sentencing. I attended the hearing because Marcus thought it would be good to see it through to the end. Miss Henderson, you were entrusted with a position of responsibility in your community, the judge said. Instead of serving that community, you served yourself. You took money that didn't belong to you. You ignored safety warnings from professionals, and when your building collapsed, you tried to blame others for your failures. This court takes such abuse of trust very seriously. Patricia cried during the sentencing. She apologized to the community and to me specifically, though I suspected her lawyer had written the apology. I didn't feel much sympathy. She'd had multiple opportunities to do the right thing, and had chosen her pride and her pocketbook over common sense every single time. Life in Meadowbrook Heights slowly returned to normal. The new HOA board was reasonable and competent. They focused on actual community needs like snow plowing and landscaping rather than manufacturing drama. Dues went up slightly to cover the professional management company, but most people agreed it was worth it. I got my final settlement payment right on schedule. $15,000, plus Marcus's fees which the HOA had also agreed to cover. All told, Patricia's vendetta against me had cost the HOA about $20,000, plus the loss of their community center, plus the special assessments on every homeowner, plus her criminal record. And I'd been proven right about everything. The roof had been unsafe. My assessment had been accurate. My advice had been sound. All of which was now part of the official record in multiple places. About 6 months after everything settled, I ran into Dennis Hoffman at the grocery store. He looked embarrassed when he saw me. "Tyler, hey, I owe you an apology. I should have backed you up when Patricia was going after you. I knew she was wrong, but I just went along with it because it was easier than fighting her." Water under the bridge, Dennis. You voted to pay my settlement. That's what mattered. Still, the whole thing was a disaster. We're lucky no one was hurt. That was my main concern from the beginning. If someone had been in that building when it came down, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. He nodded. I heard Patricia is getting out of jail next month. I hope she moves. I don't think anyone wants to see her around here anymore. Patricia did move, as it turned out. She sold her house and relocated somewhere out of state. I heard through the neighborhood gossip chain that she'd moved to Arizona to be near her daughter. The new owners of her house were a nice young couple with a baby. They kept to themselves and didn't cause any drama. The lot where the community center had stood was now a pleasant little park with young trees and park benches. Kids played there sometimes. It was a better use of the space than the building had ever been. I got back to my normal life, working on building designs and consulting projects. The whole experience had given me some interesting stories to tell at professional conferences. The day I let a building collapse was always good for a laugh, especially when I explained that it had been the right decision. Marcus framed my settlement check, or rather a copy of it. He hung it in his office as an example of what happens when you document everything and stand your ground against bullies. He claimed it was good for business. Clients saw it and knew he was the kind of lawyer who won cases. One interesting footnote to the whole affair. I got a call from a reporter at an engineering magazine about 9 months after the collapse. She was writing an article about professional liability and wanted to use my case as an example of proper engineering ethics. I agreed to be interviewed. The article came out a few months later. The engineer who said no, standing ground against liability, told the whole story in detail, with quotes from me, from Rodriguez at the building department, and even from the judge who'd sentenced Patricia. It was used as a case study in some engineering ethics classes. I got emails from students and professors thanking me for being a good example of how to handle a difficult situation. The article also landed me some consulting work. Apparently, several other HOAs around the country had read about my case and decided they needed professional assessments of their community buildings before they ended up in the same situation. I picked up 4 new clients just from that article, each paying several $1,000s for structural assessments. So in the end, Patricia's attempt to bully me into doing her maintenance work for free had backfired spectacularly. She'd lost her position, her reputation, and her freedom. The HOA had lost their building and a bunch of money. And I'd gained vindication, compensation, professional recognition, and new business opportunities. The experience taught me some valuable lessons. First, documentation is everything. Every email, every photo, every calculation I'd made had proven crucial to defending myself. Second, standing your ground is sometimes the only option, even when it feels like the whole world is against you. Third, Physics always wins in the end, and no amount of bureaucratic nonsense can change fundamental engineering principles. It also taught me about HOAs. Not all of them are bad. The new board at Meadowbrook Heights was proof of that. But when you get the wrong people in charge, people who care more about control than community, things can go south fast. The key is accountability and transparency, neither of which Patricia had valued. I still live in Meadowbrook Heights. I still attend HOA meetings occasionally, usually when there's something important being voted on. But the drama is gone. The meetings are boring now, which is exactly how they should be. They discuss budgets and maintenance schedules and whether to repave the sidewalks. Normal stuff. Sometimes when I walk past the park where the community center used to be, I think about that week when the roof was coming down. The stress of standing my ground against Patricia and her fines. The satisfaction of being proven right. The relief when no one was hurt. The justice of seeing consequences actually applied to someone who'd abused their power. It was one of the most stressful experiences of my life, but also one of the most validating. I'd done everything right. I'd used my professional expertise to identify a dangerous situation. I'd warned the people responsible. I'd documented everything. I'd stood my ground when they tried to bully me. And in the end, I'd been vindicated completely. The legal bill I'd sent the HOA had become something of a legend in the neighborhood. People called it the most expensive temper tantrum in Meadowbrook Heights history. Patricia had been so determined to prove she was right, and I was wrong that she'd ignored reality until reality literally collapsed in front of her. About a year after everything settled, the HOA threw a summer barbecue in the new park. It was well attended, lots of families and kids running around. Robert Young gave a short speech thanking everyone for their patience during the difficult transition period, and promising that the new board would always prioritize safety and community welfare. He didn't mention Patricia by name, but everyone knew what he was talking about. Someone started grilling burgers. Kids were playing on the grass. It was a nice community moment, the kind of thing the HOA was supposed to facilitate rather than prevent. Janet Moore came over to where I was standing with a beer. "You know, Tyler, in a weird way we should thank you. If you hadn't stood up to Patricia, she might have stayed in charge for years. Who knows how much more damage she would have done. I was just protecting myself. Everything else was a side effect. Still, you did good. The whole neighborhood is better off now." I couldn't argue with that. The HOA was functional now. The neighborhood was peaceful. The community actually felt like a community instead of a dictatorship, and I had $15,000 and a good story to tell. Several months later, I was contacted by a lawyer representing 3 other homeowners in different HOAs across Colorado. They'd all been in situations similar to mine, being pressured by their HOAs to do things that were unsafe or unreasonable. They wanted to know if I'd be willing to testify as an expert witness in their cases. I agreed, figuring my experience could help other people in the same situation. 2 of the cases settled quickly once the HOAs realized I was involved and saw what had happened with Patricia. The 3rd went to trial, and I spent a day on the witness stand explaining engineering principles and professional standards to a jury. That HOA lost badly and ended up paying even more than mine had. Word spread in the legal community. I became the go-to expert for HOA structural disputes in the Denver area. It wasn't work I'd ever planned to do, but it paid well, and it felt good to help people who were being pushed around by petty tyrants with clipboards. The experience also made me more careful about reading contracts and bylaws. I'd learned my lesson about skimming the fine print. Now when I bought anything or signed anything, I read every word, especially the parts buried in dense legal language. That's where they hide the traps. I also became more active in the HOA board meetings, not running for the board myself, but attending regularly and making sure they stayed on track. Other homeowners started doing the same. We'd all learned that you can't just ignore the HOA and hope they make good decisions. You have to pay attention and speak up when things start going sideways. The professional recognition from the magazine article led to other opportunities. I was invited to speak at an engineering conference in Seattle about professional liability and ethics. I gave a presentation titled, "When Saying No is the Right Answer," that was very well received. Several people came up afterward to share their own stories of standing up to clients or bosses who wanted them to do something unsafe. One engineer from California told me about being pressured to approve a building plan that he knew wouldn't meet seismic codes. He'd refused, gotten fired, and then sued for wrongful termination. He won, just like I had, but it had taken 3 years and cost him his career at that firm. "Your story made me feel better about mine," he said. "Sometimes you need to know that other people have been through it and come out okay." That was maybe the most rewarding part of the whole experience. Not the money, though that was nice. Not the vindication, though that felt good. But knowing that my stand had helped other people stand up for themselves. That my documentation and my willingness to fight had made it easier for others in similar situations. Life moved on. Seasons changed. The trees in the park grew taller. New families moved into the neighborhood. Kids grew up and moved out. The HOA continued to function smoothly under professional management. The drama of Patricia Henderson and the collapsing community center faded into neighborhood legend, the kind of story people told at parties. But I never forgot the lessons I'd learned. Document everything. Stand your ground when you're right. Don't let bullies push you around, even when they have official titles and clipboards. And always, always trust physics over politics. The snow came back every winter, of course. This is Colorado. But now when it piled up on roofs around the neighborhood, the HOA hired professionals to clear it. No more trying to coerce homeowners into doing dangerous work to save money. That lesson, at least, had been thoroughly learned. I kept all my documentation from the case in a file in my office. Sometimes I'd pull it out and flip through it, remembering those tense days when I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing or making a huge mistake. The photos of the sagging roof, the email chains with Patricia, the calculations showing the snow load, the final settlement check. It was proof that standing your ground could work out, that fighting back against unreasonable authority was possible, that one person with expertise and determination could win against the system. Not always, not easily, but it was possible. And that made all the difference. Years from now, when people ask me about the most interesting project I ever worked on, I won't talk about the office building in Denver or the hospital wing in Fort Collins. I'll talk about the community center that I let collapse, because sometimes the best engineering decision is knowing when not to act, when to step back and let physics do its job, and when to document everything so that when the dust settles, everyone knows exactly who was right and who was wrong. That's the story of how an HOA demanded I clear snow from their roof, how I watched it collapse instead, and how I sent them my legal bill for $15,000. It's a story about standing up to bullies, trusting your professional judgment, and the immutable laws of physics that don't care about HOA bylaws or angry board presidents. It's a story with a happy ending, at least for me and for the neighborhood. Patricia learned her lesson the hard way. The community got a better HOA board and a nice park. I got vindication and compensation, and a story I'll be telling for the rest of my career. And somewhere out there, maybe someone else is standing on their porch at 7 in the morning, facing down an unreasonable HOA president with a clipboard, wondering if they should cave in or stand their ground. I hope they read this story. I hope they document everything. And I hope they remember that sometimes the right answer is no, even when it costs you, because standing your ground is worth it in the end. The community center lot is beautiful now, especially in spring when the trees bloom. Kids play there after school. Families have picnics on summer evenings. It's everything a community space should be, serving everyone rather than sitting empty most of the time waiting for the occasional meeting or potluck. Sometimes I sit on one of the benches there and work on my laptop, enjoying the fresh air and watching the neighborhood go by. It's peaceful. It's pleasant. And it's a constant reminder that out of disaster can come something better if you handle things the right way. That's the end of my story. The HOA demanded I clear snow from their roof. I refused. The roof collapsed. I sent them my bill. Justice was served. And everyone, except Patricia, lived happily ever after.